All right. Well, I'm glad that all of you are here tonight, and just want to start with a reminder that we won't have class again until after the new year. Will and I were talking earlier about we've had this flip and flop towards this end, but hopefully, especially since no one got here till right at the last minute, I thought maybe I didn't communicate well last week, but apparently we did okay. Also want to welcome all of you in Uganda. We're glad to be in partnership with you, and we had a great meeting bright and early here, 6 o'clock this morning, our time, with Uganda leaders, and it was a wonderful, wonderful meeting. And we look forward to meeting with the rest of you pastors and leaders after the new year. So tonight we will be looking at coaching and mentoring. And before we get started, we'll go ahead and take up some prayer requests, if you have some.
Pray for Chris and Ronnie. I don't know what's going on, but that,
Chris had indicated to us that he was going to end up homeless. He said homeless, but anyway, trying to find a new place to live.
Right.
So definitely want to be in prayer for him. And then with Ronnie, I can't share a whole lot with Ronnie except the fact that he just needs prayer, and we want to see him come back and continue to plant. So
he was on fire, so that's what bothers me a lot right now.
Well, there's no doubt that all of our planters are receiving spiritual attacks from the enemy, and it's because anytime you decide you're going to do something for God, literally all hell breaks loose. That's just the way it happens. And so we need to be in prayer for these guys. And even in our church, we've had some difficulties that we're hopefully getting past. Will and I have been praying and fasting every week, or most every week. Will said he doesn't look like it, but yeah, we have. And on Wednesdays, we've been going out to 4 apartment complexes and prayer walking. And we've come to find out that most people who are out in the evening are people walking their dogs. So we have chased down every person with a dog, and we get about 10 feet and say, is he friendly? And so far, they've all been friendly. So, but we've been able to pray over people. We've been able to completely share the gospel, full gospel presentations. Haven't had anybody receive yet, but we're out on the street trying to be a witness and bring people in. So, but yeah, let's pray for these guys. Anything else?
Christopher, they didn't show up this weekend because they said that the girls had lice from her.
Okay. Yeah, we had a family that was gone for a little while for some personal reasons. They said it didn't have anything really to do with the church, which I'm glad. Still not glad they weren't there, but several months. And then they showed back up a couple of weeks, and then they weren't there again. So we thought, but it's a legitimate reason. So I never will forget, my wife and I, Catherine took our girls to a little girls' party. The woman was a doctor, right?
It was a playgroup. We were
a playgroup,
homeschool.
right?
They didn't get life from school.
Right. So it was a homeschool group, and went over to this big 2-story house in kind of a ritzy area of town. So it wasn't like we were in the trailer park, or if you live in a trailer park, I'm not trying to say anything bad. I grew up trailer trash, I'm telling you. So, but anyway, they're trying on all this stuff, and then we get the phone call. My girls got lice. So we check our girls. We're like, okay. So you can be neat and clean and prim and proper and live in a big house and have a lot of money and still get lice, right? So anyway, not that they wanted that broadcast to Uganda and beyond, but
that's old news.
Yeah. Well, let's pray and give God glory for tonight. We'll thank him. We'll pray for these guys and gals, and have a good class. Lord, we thank you so much for who you are. Lord, we thank you for this season, for this time of year. And Lord, even though every day ought to be a day of thanksgiving, a day of celebrating you coming as our Emmanuel, as God with us. But this time of year, there's so many people lonely, so many people searching, and Lord, we have the answer. And so we thank you for this season, and that you would give us opportunities to share. Lord, I just lift up some of these guys from class that aren't here. I pray for Chris. I just pray that you help him to find a permanent place that he can live and afford, and just be with him as he seeks. Lord, that maybe I can contact him and find out more of what's going on. But Lord, I just lift him up. I pray for Ronnie. I just pray in his situation that you would speak to him clear, that you would draw him to yourself, that you would draw him back to class. And we do pray for his family from our church that wasn't there Sunday. I just pray that they are able to take care of their issue and then be back in church. But Lord, we worship you. We praise you tonight. We thank you for just providing this training center. And I pray, Lord, tonight you will clear our hearts, clear our minds, that we would be focused on what you have for us. And we just pray all these things in Jesus' name and for his glory. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Hey, come on in, guys. Is there enough of them there? Okay, great.
Just a moment.
So the first part of tonight is most of the material is going to be taken straight from the Coaching 101 and from the Mentoring 101. These are very basic books. For those of you who are planting, you've got these. Hopefully you were able to go through as much of it as you can. For those of you who have not, these are great books. They're small. That's what I like about them. John Maxwell is one of the leading teachers on leadership. I've taken many of his leadership studies, conferences, listened to him on audio, but his is Mentoring 101, and then Robert Logan with Coaching 101. I'm relatively new to coaching. I've only was introduced to coaching maybe 4 years ago, when we had a guy come from Wisconsin who actually used to pastor here. He went on a mission trip to Wisconsin and he never came back. So Tom was not happy about that. No, I'm just teasing. Tom was very happy. He went and planted a church up there in a place called Wazichi. But he came, and as Gil was saying, the first time we took this, we were in a chapel here on Mary Hardin Baylor campus, and it was a great time. And as soon as I got the book and took the class myself, I was on your side of the table learning, and then begin to teach it myself and incorporating it. So tonight, I hope that this session will help you to be a better disciple maker through mentoring and coaching. So we'll start with Coaching and Mentoring 101, the sheet that is titled at the top, Coaching and Mentoring 101. So the first thing we want to look at is, what is the difference? So as disciple makers, we will be working with new converts or other believers. Some of them aren't so much new converts. And I don't say young converts anymore, because you can be a new convert and not be a young convert. So as you make disciples, as you begin to pour into other people, there are times when coaching is necessary. There's times when mentoring is necessary. There's times when counseling is necessary. But all of these things are different, and we're not going to talk a whole lot about counseling, except to point out its difference and then focus on mentoring and coaching. So let me just say what counseling is and get that past us, because that's an area that we'll talk about in depth later on. We've got 2 sessions that will deal with pastors and leaders as being counselors. So counseling usually involves a crisis situation. Something has happened. You're trying to help someone to recover or to break through, get over an issue that usually pertains to a crisis situation in their life. So as y'all know, I share office with Miss Rhonda, who is a certified counselor that we use in our association. And she's in there right now counseling. And so when you counsel somebody, it's almost always dealing with a crisis situation, something wrong. But coaching and mentoring doesn't have to have anything wrong or a crisis. So mentoring, we'll start out with that one, is effectively reproducing your success in someone else, pouring what you know into someone to help them to rise to the fullest of their potential as an individual in their field of interest. And so as Jesus commanded us to make disciples, mentoring and coaching are essential in helping others become all the Lord intended them to be. So say you're coaching or you're mentoring someone in the field of interest, say it's a sport. Well, what you're trying to do is pour all you know about the sport into that person. You're trying to help them become like you are. And so it may be nursing, it may be whatever the field is, but you're trying to share with them everything that you know that has helped you to be a better whatever that is. You're pouring that into them to help them rise up. So you're going to teach them all of the tricks that you learned for batting, all of the outfielder tricks, whatever the field is in, you're going to teach them everything that you know, and you're basically replicating what you know into them. And so the coaching process addresses specific personal goals and objectives in a person's life, relationship, or profession by examining what is going on right now, discovering what the obstacles or challenges might be, and choosing a course of action to overcome those obstacles and challenges so that one can meet their goals. Coaching is about helping people accomplish goals by drawing answers from within the individual. So the difference between coaching and mentoring in a nutshell is mentoring is pouring what you know into someone else. Coaching is helping them to be the fullest of their potential by drawing out of them answers, goals, that sort of thing. But you're pulling out of them instead of pouring into them. And so you may not know that individual real well, but through a process of questioning and listening, you'll begin to pull out of them the answers to their own questions. And I'm going to share a little bit later some examples of how that personally helped me. Like I said, until the Church Planting Center, I had never been introduced to coaching either. But after I was introduced to coaching, it helped me in leadership greatly. And I'll give you one of my best examples in a little bit of how it helped me. So we want to look at biblical examples. If we're going to disciple someone and we're going to mentor and we're going to coach, as Christian leaders, it needs to be from a biblical perspective. We need to see how it's used in the scriptures. Mark 3:13 through 15, it says, "And he went up on the mountain and summoned those whom he himself wanted, and they came to him, and he appointed 12 so that they would be with him, and that he could send them out to preach and to have authority to cast out demons." So we see in this passage of scripture that Jesus poured his life into 12 men for 3 years. He called them to follow him. He called them to learn from him, and then to practice what he taught them. And then he launched them out, in his own words, to do greater works than he would even do. Jesus helped these men to grow in character as individuals and to rise to their fullest potential in what he called them to become. And the goal of discipleship is to become like your teacher. And so you are pouring into that person. And Paul had a great statement when he said, "Follow me as I follow Christ." Paul was trying every way in the world to be like his master and trying to pour into other people everything he knew about following the master. So you see this example of mentoring that Jesus did with the 12. And then in 1 Corinthians 11, when Paul said, be imitators of me, just as I also am of Christ. And then in 2 Timothy 2:2, you see it literally passed on from multiple generations of discipleship. These things which you have heard me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. So the Apostle Paul mentored several men in his ministry, and I only listed 3 of them here, but if you, all those names like Onesiphorus and Epaphroditus and all of those hard names to say, if you look in the scriptures, there is a slew of men that he poured into and mentored and touched their lives. And so as we mentor people, we want to share with them every single thing that we know that'll help them to be better in their field of interest. So in some ways, that's what these classes are doing. It's pouring into you everything that at least we know about leadership and planting to help you be the best that you can be. And so some examples of coaching. Mark 10:35-38. James and John, the 2 sons of Zebedee, came up to Jesus saying, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. And he said to them, what do you want me to do for you? They said to him, grant that we may sit, one on your right and one on your left in your glory. But Jesus said to them, you do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized? And then again, we see in Mark 16, now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he was asking his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, but still others, Jeremiah or one of the prophets. He said to them, but who do you say that I am? So we see the difference in mentoring here is he's not pouring into them what he knows. He's drawing out of them what they know, basically, or what the answers are coming from their own gut. And so the interesting thing is Jesus asked 307 questions in the scriptures. Jesus practiced listening and questioning to draw answers from his disciples and others. You notice how Jesus seemed to do that a lot, didn't he? They asked him a question and he would say, whose name and inscription is on this coin? You know, he wasn't trying to pour into them. He's trying to draw the answer out. And so we see even in these examples, he's asking questions and listening. So all of you, whether you're a pastor's wife, deacon, elders, graybeards, lay leaders, should be discipling others. I could have had a longer list, but I figured that pretty much said it, right? So, but no matter who you are, you should be discipling others. As leaders in the church body, you should be helping others rise to their fullest potential, and mentoring and coaching are essentials in the process. So in the mentoring John Maxwell book, one of the quotes that stood out to me was on page 101. Maxwell quotes Douglas M. Lawson, we exist temporarily through what we take, but we live forever through what we give. And that was an incredible quote to me, because it's really talking about the legacy you're going to leave, how many lives that you touch. And in a world where everybody's interested in taking or getting, you don't see many people who are willing to sacrifice and give and pour into others. So Maxwell talks about a 5-step process for training people, chapter 5, page 64. The first step is I model. In the early part of Jesus' ministry, he modeled the ministry that he would soon pass on to the apostles. The mentee must see the process in action. Most people, as we learned in a previous section, are visual learners and need to see the model. So I put, I don't know if I put this on yours, but I gave me a little note. I had an associate pastor named James. He was an incredibly smart young man. He came to my church as an internship for the summer. At the end of the summer, he came to me and said, I've learned more in 3 months at this church than I've learned in 3 years at the university. Can I stay on maybe as an associate pastor? So we actually created a job description for him as an associate pastor apprentice, which is a little bit different. Everybody in the church knew that he was there to learn. So I took him with me to the funeral home. The first time I had a funeral, I asked the family, because I thought this family would be okay with it. I said, would it be okay if my associate pastor apprentice comes to the funeral home? He will be very quiet. He's going to sit. He's going to take notes. He's just going to watch. And they said, sure. So he came to the funeral home with me, watched us walk through the whole process. I worked with the funeral director. We worked with the family. We helped them plan the entire funeral and all that process. He sat in the corner real quiet and took notes. So I modeled that. That's an area, our Uganda brothers was talking this morning about the fact that so many things that we're teaching here are very practical. Things that in Bible college or seminary you don't learn. So he was able to go with me and see me in action. Now, I don't know what he thought of that, but at least I was modeling for him what to do, right?
Well, he got to see how you would do.
Yeah.
Your role is interacting with the funeral director as go-between with the family.
Right. And the other thing, and we don't have that this year, we had in the past, but I actually had a funeral home director come in. Gil remembers, she's a wonderful lady. Ms. Gibson owns a funeral home here in Belton. And she came in and I just basically told her, will you speak to our pastors about things you can't stand that pastors do that you wish they wouldn't do when there's a funeral? Things like that, right? Mm-hmm. And she was like, are you sure you want me to? I said, yeah, they need to know. You know, if they don't know, they're going to keep doing those things, you know. So, and those are things like I wish I would have known. When I did my first funeral, I was on my own. I had done a few family funerals, but, you know, you can kind of get away with some things there, not knowing what you're doing. And they'll never let you do another one, or they'll praise you even if you didn't do a good job. But anyway, James got to learn by me modeling it. Mm-hmm. And then the step 2, I mentor. As the apostles followed Jesus, he began to have them participate in the activities of ministry. Jesus took time to answer their questions and give them correction. Mm-hmm. So we know that one of the areas they said, Lord, all these people are hungry. You can't send them away hungry. And Jesus said, you give them something to eat. You know, and they're like, what? So he said, go tell them to sit on the ground in groups of 50 and bring me the fish and bread, right? So they're participating now in part of the ministry.
Jesus pulled up the reverse card from the Uno deck.
Right. So later, James got to go with me and help me at a funeral. And I allowed him to open and close in prayer, help people, you know, that were coming in to know what to do. So he went more from just sitting in the corner watching the process of putting the funeral together to actually participating in parts of the funeral and being active in it, the actual funeral itself, not putting the funeral together. And so mentoring is very important. That's that pouring in what you know and then allowing them to participate in the activity itself. And then the third step that Maxwell says is that I monitor. So first I model, then I mentor, then I monitor. Now it's time to switch places. Jesus' disciples presented him with a dilemma and told them to take care of it. Jesus was a part of the process, but his disciples had specific instructions in accomplishing the task. And there's an example in Mark 6. So the monitoring part, when I was in my previous pastorate, I had several associate pastors and they had never preached before. And so on Sunday evenings, they were in a rotation where I helped them to, they would prepare a sermon. I would look over it, kind of give some correction in it. And then on Sunday evenings, they preached. So I did kind of monitor in it. I wanted to see the sermon before they got up there and preached it. But then on Sunday evenings, they were up there doing it.
Yeah.
When I went to my first church to pastor, I had only preached about 3 or 4, well, maybe a few more than that, maybe a half a dozen sermons, which means I probably wasn't all that good at it. And I wanted these guys, when they went to their first church, to be pretty good at it. So I helped them in the process, and then I turned them loose and let them do it themselves. Then I motivate. At this point, you remove yourself from the task and let the mentee go. At this point, you are mainly there to motivate and encourage and to help him or her to improve on their skills. Jesus sent his disciples out to give them opportunity to preach, heal, and cast out demons. And then they reported back to Jesus all that had taken place. Jesus rejoiced and blessed them, and then gave them further instructions. So James, I use James because he's such a great example, because he was actually an apprentice. He was someone that I was in an intentional mentoring, coaching, discipling relationship. And so James comes up to me and says, there is a church locally that is without a pastor. Would it be okay if I got on the list to fill the pulpit? And I said, absolutely, that'll be great. Because see, now he'll go somewhere and preach and I'm not there, right? And it'll be a Sunday morning, not a Sunday evening, right? So James goes to this church and he preaches, and then he comes back and he says, you're never going to guess what they asked me. And I said, they asked you if you'd come and be their interim. And he goes, how'd you know? And I said, because you're a good preacher. He became a very good preacher, probably better than me. And so my wife's over there. But he did become a good preacher, didn't he? Yeah. So he goes and is their interim, right? They chose him to be the interim. So we met every week, and he came back, and I said, now, James, don't be surprised if within the next 6 months, they don't try to call you to be their pastor. He goes, you think they would do that? It was 2.5 weeks, not 6 months, 2.5 weeks. He comes back, you're not going to believe what they asked me to do. I said, they asked you to be the pastor, didn't they? And he said, yeah, what do you think I ought to do? And I said, first, I think you ought to go pray about it and see what God says. And he says, what do you think? I say, I think if God says yes, I'm going to celebrate with you. If God says no, you still got a place here. So he goes and prays, and he says, I feel God's leading me to step out. Do you think it's a good step? I said, I think it's a great step. So he went from me modeling and him watching, to me mentoring, allowing him to be a part of the process, to me monitoring, just kind of going over the sermon, and then he's up there preaching, motivating him to go beyond that. He became an interim and then ended up becoming their pastor. And then this is kind of the icing on the cake. I get a phone call one day. Pastor Carl, are you busy? I said, no, go ahead. So what are you doing? He said, I'm driving to my first death call. And he said, I know what to do. I watched you do it. I just wanted to let you know that that's where I'm going. Would you pray for me? And I said, yeah, I'll be glad to pray for you. I said, do you need me to do anything? No. He said, I know what to do. I watched it. He went with me to a death call. So he knew what to do. And I prayed over him right there as he was driving. And I told him, now, when you get through, let me know how it went. And he did, and he did great. He pastored that church for about 1.5 years. And then his wife started going to college in Dallas, and they moved up there, and he got a job with Buckner International. So we were a step, then that interim, then the pastorate, and then Buckner, and then he and his wife are going onto the mission field. Of course, COVID hit, and I'm not sure what they're doing right now, but anyway, it was we had a wonderful coaching and mentoring relationship together. The 5th step that John Maxwell has is I multiply. This is the time for the new leader to disciple, mentor others. They will now begin modeling leadership for others. In my example that I put down is Larry Robert. He's one of our church planters where Brother Chris attends. He received a call in my church. I gave an invitation one Sunday and said, if you're here today and you feel God is calling you to something, calling you to a specific ministry, that you feel God's got a calling on your life in some area, come forward. And he didn't. He sat there. The next week, I gave an invitation. He and his wife came up and said, I asked him, what are you coming forward? I knew he was saved already, right? And he said, I'm coming forward because I should have came last week. He said, when you made that invitation last week, my heart about jumped out of my chest and I could hardly sit there. And I couldn't be disobedient 2 weeks in a row. And I said, well, what are you coming forward? He said, I feel like God's called me to preach. So he accepted a call to preach, ended up going on and pastoring a church and pouring into other people. So it's I multiply. So the goal in a mentoring and coaching process is for you to take somebody under your wing, and we'll talk about the process of what that looks like here in a little bit. But eventually, that relationship is going to end. And then that person is going to go on and begin to coach and mentor other people. A great example of that, and I'm surprised I didn't put that in here, is the movie War Room. Absolutely wonderful movie. The older lady in the movie had prayed for God to put somebody in her path that she could pour, well, she didn't say somebody, a young woman that she could pour into her life. And then towards the end of the movie, if you'll remember, the lady is just like, it can't be over. And she's, it's not over, but now you're going to take my spot and you're going to pour into someone. So we see a great example in that movie of what coaching and mentoring is about. And she asked her a lot of questions. How's your relationship with your husband? The lady wasn't too thrilled about answering some of her questions, but she had to pull that answer out of her. She couldn't pour the answer into her. So within the 5-step process, you need to give the mentee the big 3. Sounds like a coming of age father-son talk here, doesn't it? But responsibility, job description, or expectation agreement. So Maxwell teaches that in this coaching mentoring process, that person needs to understand what their responsibility is. And we've talked about that in the past, creating a job description. When I brought James on board as an associate pastor apprentice, his job description looked different than the other associate pastors. And I had at least 3 other associate pastors. And so he needed to know what was expected of an associate pastor apprentice. So he had a job description. Authority. Do not try to control every detail. Let them actually be responsible for the area that you've given them responsibility over, right? Don't micromanage. And then accountability. You must be supportive but honest. Use constructive criticism. You want to build them up, not tear them down. I never will forget one of the associate pastors that I had the first time he preached. It's a funny story. It's one of my favorite stories. But the first time he preached, I said, now, before you get up there on Sunday, I want to see your message. He showed up. He was all excited. I started going through his message, made some corrections. He went and told one of the other associate pastors. He's like, man, I got in there. Pastor Carl busted out this red pen. He said, man, I didn't have anything left of my sermon when he was done but the title and the text. And that wasn't true. Number one, I didn't pull out a red pen. I didn't pull out a pen at all. So yeah, I would have used a black one. But the bottom line is he was kind of hurt because I gave him some positive criticism. Later, he came back, got over it a little bit, came back. We worked on his message. He got up there and preached it. And the praise he got from, actually, he preached one sermon before that without me helping him at all because I wanted to see where he was at. The second one I helped him on. People came up and was like, wow, that was an incredible improvement. And he's like, you know, he was really excited that, you know, he was doing it. So the positive criticism, the accountability needs to be there. We won't grow without it, but it needs to be positive criticism. You're there to help build them up, not tear them down. If you are in a coaching or a mentoring relationship, discipling someone, and your goal is not to build them up, they'll get discouraged. They'll feel like that all you're trying to do is put them down. So remember, I think those three are so important. If you're going to give them a responsibility, let them be clear in understanding what it is. Give them authority to do it. Don't micromanage them. And then have some accountability, because they won't grow without the accountability. The best illustration, chapter 6, page 75, is an acronym or whatever you call those things with the word best. Believe in them, let you know that you see their potential. Encourage them. The best leaders are always encouragers. Share with them. Don't hold back, hold anything back. Give them what they need to succeed. And then trust them. Loyalty is developed through trust. One of the things that I think is so important about pouring into other people is, if you're truly trying to see the best, them be the best that they can be, you also don't worry about if they surpass you in their ability to do what you're teaching them to do. And that's a hard thing right there. I had somebody ask me, what if he becomes a better preacher than you? Well, I can still say it's because of me you came. No, I'm just. That's where that head was. No, I mean, if somebody comes up and says the greatest preacher in the world was mentored by, you know, Brother Cody over there, I don't think that's going to hurt your feelings, is it? The problem that many people have as leaders and as coaches and mentors is give them all you got. If you're really going to pour into them to see them develop to their fullest potential, don't hold back. Pour into them, you know. And if they become better at what you're trying to pour into them than you've succeeded. I mean, that's not a failure on your part. And then drawing out of them. Some people, it's in there. They just don't know where it's at. And good coaching helps to draw that out. There are some things that you can't pour into someone. So, and that's where coaching comes in, we're going to talk about next. But in the mentoring process, the last part of it is celebrate their successes. After Edel preached that very first sermon, the one that he said, I pulled the red pin out. I mean, everybody came up and he was grinning ear to ear. He was so excited. Everyone was praising him. I did not say one word of negativity on that first sermon, because he needed that to build the confidence. And there was probably areas that he could have had some correction, but once him and I came out of that office and he went to preach that, I let him have all those, I let him, that's not a good way to put it, but everybody came forward, patted him on the back, and that's what they need. So celebrate success. Who is mentoring the mentor? Who's mentoring the mentor? We teach this all the time in that Paul Timothy. If you're pouring into someone, who's pouring into you? Brother Will picks my mentor up every week for church that he's able. He hasn't come in a couple of weeks. He's 89, but he's one of my mentors. I sat today with two of my other mentors. I have people who are pouring into my life. So as you mentor and coach and disciple, you need to remember that you need it too. And so who's mentoring the mentor? And then I talked about this earlier. What if they pass me by? Who cares? Then that means you've done your job well if they pass you by. So we'll move into, or is there any questions? Any questions? Hopefully we're thorough enough that you don't have to have too many, but coaching. Mentoring is more about pouring into a person what you know to help them succeed in specific areas of interest or skill. Coaching is about drawing answers or solutions out of a person to help them accomplish goals or tasks. Coaches help others get where they're going. They help them find their way and give them perspective. So within the framework of a coaching relationship, people can take stock of where they are, figure out where God wants them to go, and then decide the steps to take to get there. So one of the things I wanted to say in the coaching is the fact that I can coach you in an area that I have no real interest or no talent or skill in. And it's because I'm helping you to draw it out of you. Where mentoring, I have to have that skill to an extent because I'm trying to pour everything I know into you about that skill. James wanted to be a pastor and in ministry. Well, that's what I do. That's my job. So I was able to pour everything I knew into him. But there are areas where you may be called to coach someone and you're not going to be an expert in their field, but you're going to help draw out of them goals and be able to put those on paper, help them to get where they need to be, help them to figure out how to get past the obstacles. And that doesn't take you having skill in the area they want to succeed in. So I want to read the Barnabas factor on page 101 in our coaching book, the Barnabas
Page 14.
factor. Is that what that's?
Yeah.
Oh, page 14. Yes, it's coaching 101, page 14. Page 15. I'll get it right here in a minute. So, yes, it is page 15. I wonder why I put 14 and 15. And a little correction. The Barnabas factor. Originally named Joseph, Barnabas was one of Paul's closest companions, traveling with him on missionary journeys. Translated literally, Barnabas means son of encouragement. Acts 11:23 and 24 says this of Barnabas. When he arrived in Antioch and saw the evidence of the grace of God, he was glad and encouraged them all to remain true to the Lord with all their hearts. He was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and faith, and a great number of people were brought to the Lord. That's the description of a coach, one who is called alongside to encourage, prepare, equip, and help others succeed. Coaching is a biblical role. So Barnabas also acted as a liaison between people. If you remember, Paul was fed up with John Mark. Remember? Yeah. And of all the people, Paul should have had a little sympathy. Why? Because when Saul came up to the apostles, they were like, no, this guy's a persecutor. And Barnabas comes along and says, no, I think he's legit now. So Barnabas stood up for him. Well, John Mark bailed on that first missionary journey. And on the second one, he wanted to go along. And Paul was like, I don't think so. You ditched us on the first one. You're not going. Who steps in? Barnabas. Let's give the guy a second chance. Paul's like, nope. Barnabas like, I tell you what, you take Silas with you, I'll take him with me. If you read the scriptures later on, Paul comes out and admits and send John Mark. He's proven to be worthy. He's proven to be a good servant, not because of Paul, but because of Barnabas's coaching and encouragement. So coaching is very, very important. So what is at the core of coaching? This should be on your, I don't have these numbered, but I think page 3. Under coaching, what is the core of coaching? Relationships. Relationships are the core of coaching. It is about a relationship. And then what is the foundation of coaching? Listening. So coaching is about developing good relationships and then listening to people. The reason you have to listen is because in order to ask good questions to draw out of someone, you have to listen. That is something that we as pastors have a hard time doing because we're used to talking. So being a good coach, we have to learn to listen a little bit. So in our coaching book with Robert Logan, he lists 5 cardinal rules to listening, which are on page 36. The first rule of listening is to focus, giving undivided attention to the person who is talking. The second is to summarize. Summarizing is mirroring back what people are saying. So one of the things in listening when you focus is let them spill everything they want to spill out. Don't interrupt and stop them. And then the summarizing part is sometimes people need to hear what they said back. That's what he's talking about, mirror it back. So what you're saying is, and reiterate it, that way you make sure you're on the same page. And then the third one is invite. When a person talks a bit about a topic, then stops, ask for more. Sometimes they just don't give enough information. And so invite them to share more. And then unpack is the fourth one. Exhaust the speaker's resources before sharing anything yourself. So these are keys to good listening. Is if you're going to talk, it's, well, tell me more. Tell me more. You want to let them get as much out as they can. And then clarify, check your assumptions. Ask, here's what I'm hearing you say so far. Make sure that you're clear with what they're actually saying. So I'll give you an example. My wife and I were having a discussion the other day about people who are active. Well, our definitions of active person was completely different in what we were talking about. And I actually stopped and said, I don't think we're talking about the same thing here. An active person to me is someone who plays tennis, who jogs, who, rides a bicycle, who is, and she was speaking as someone who just all day long, maybe about the house, they're constantly doing something. They're not idle. They don't sit. Well, I was thinking more of physical activity. So once we got on the same page, then we could agree on what we were talking about. Because there's she said, yeah, at one time we agreed. Well, we agreed.
Do we
now.
need some counseling?
Yeah. No, I told y'all we weren't talking about counseling today. Coaching and mentoring.
Coaching and mentoring.
So, but clarifying, because yes, yeah, exactly. Sometimes it is very difficult if you try to go into something and you didn't really understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
So asking those questions back.
I was thinking back, we used to coach third and fourth grade boys basketball for Upwards basketball back in California. You get those kids in there and they've had all these, they've been playing basketball their whole life. They're big basketball players, and they walk in and you got to break them down to, you've got to get them all the way back to just how to dribble the ball, because they don't even know how to dribble the ball. They know how to flip it around and do the fancy over and under the hand stuff that they want to do. So sometimes when these rules right here will unpack that, so you can find out where's that person at, where exactly where they focus.
Yep. So coaching is about listening, but it's also about asking questions. After listening, asking questions is the second most important skill in building a strong coaching relationship. And you have to realize in a coaching relationship that the questions you ask, you're not wanting to implant the answer in the person. You're asking the questions to draw the answer out of the person. And so a good example of this is many times when I'm talking to people about their spiritual gifts or natural talents, abilities that they can use in the church, they may have a gift I don't have. So I'm not going to be trying to pour into them about that gift, especially if it's the opposite of mine. Spiritual gifts are kind of like that. If you're very prophetic, you usually kind of lack compassion and mercy. So it's kind of hard to pour into someone compassion and mercy when you're thus saith the Lord, stop sinning type of person, right? So, but you're trying to draw out of them what those gifts and talents and abilities are. And so asking the right questions, do you like working with children? I hate children. Okay, the nursery's out. They're probably not going to work, but you're drawing the answer out. So what are the three main questions asked in coaching? Yes, sir.
One of the key things too was you have to make sure your question isn't something where they can have an easy escape with
open-ended.
Yes or no.
Open-ended,
yeah. Yes, that is very true.
If there's way too much to unpack. Sometimes
well,
when I'm dealing with Joe's, there's a lot that comes out.
And that may need counseling.
Yeah.
That may need to go to
There's
professional
moments where
counselor.
there's just a lot to unpack, and there's been quite a few moments where I've just sat on the couch just went.
Well, the thing we have to understand about coaching is that usually, like when I would meet with James,
Yeah.
it was ministry related. We were talking about furthering his calling with God. It's not a crisis thing. He's not. I mean, there were some times when he would maybe unpack something that he was a little nervous about, or, I think he was unpacking when he called me up and said, "I'm headed to my first death call."
Yeah.
My first
Yeah,
death
that's
call.
a bad.
So that's not a crisis situation in the sense of he knew what to do. He was wanting some assurance. He was wanting,
Yeah.
So for one thing, if you're on the couch and they're really unpacking, that sounds like therapeutic session going on there. This is more of drawing out of someone to help them accomplish some goals, some tasks.
It's more, and I'll try to define it better, because I don't do counseling. I won't. I'm too blunt for that, and I'm not gentle. So I'm definitely not a scalpel. I'm a sledgehammer. But what we'll talk about is when they're trying to witness to others or talk to others about the faith on post, and they're tightening restrictions on soldiers on how they can say things and what they can say. And it's getting to a point where they're unloading all these different rules and regs and asking me, because I carried a badge for years in the Army, like, how do you get around this? How do I still do this? And
Well, see what you're saying is they're asking you questions. That's not coaching. So coaching is you asking them questions. So to turn that around, you would say, so how do you feel you can get past this? What are some goals that you can do to be a better witness in this situation? You're trying to draw the answer out of them.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're asking you these questions, that's more of the mentoring side. And if you're not there doing it, how are you pouring into them what you know about doing it?
Yeah.
You see, when you coach and mentor, it has to be within the parameters and the context of coaching and mentoring. So if they're asking you all the questions, it's supposed to be the other way around. You should be pulling the questions and answers out of them. And so say, I'll try to give an example. When someone says something like, how do I have a funeral coming up? So now there's a set thing, you know what the objective is. And you say, well, what are your goals when you preach this funeral? What are you going to try to accomplish? Well, I know he's not a believer. I want the gospel to be shared. So how do you intend on incorporating that into your message? I'm not giving answers. I'm asking questions and trying to draw the answers out of them. I don't know if that's a great example, but I'm trying to.
Actually, it hit right on the head for me. It just like, thank you.
Right. So coaching is about pulling they have the answer in here. And there's times when you don't even know what the answer is, because it's their personal, you're trying to help them to get where they need to be. And so sometimes you don't know where that's at until the end of the session when they've drawn it out of themselves.
I think that's the key to the listening and coaching.
Yes.
You're not listening to say anything.
Right.
If you're listening to say something, you're not coaching.
Right.
You're listening to understand and then ask the questions that then lead them to find the answers.
Exactly. It's an excellent point. So, and that's what I was talking about earlier. When you do open your mouth, it needs to be either tell me more about that, where they're, and then when it is time for you, it's okay. Give me an example of how you're gonna, and see, then that pulls, they've got to give the answer, So
Or it might be, what questions would you need to answer to ultimately just make this decision? How can you get those answers?
Right.
There are ways you can go and find this information.
Right. And it may need to be what Cody's talking about is there anything I can do to help you attain that goal? Well, if they say, as a matter of fact, there is, then the answer's still coming out of them, and you haven't really poured anything. You're getting the answers by asking questions and having it come, out of them. And so as we get into this a little bit further, we'll see some more examples, but coaching is really about helping them to get where they need to go, set the goals that they need to accomplish to get there. And then when you meet back, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you go over how did it go? You know, you're asking questions. You're not. So that's what's hard about coaching, is the fact that if you're not careful, you'll become a counselor, or you're trying to tell them all you know. And that's not what coaching is. And that's why when I first learned this, it helped me so much. Close your ears, Catherine. Because I'm wanting to fix your problem. I mean, I'm a fixer. That's what I do. You know, let me tell you how to do. Well, no, coaching don't need Carl's help. Carl needs to learn how to help that person draw out of them the solution. It may need to be that God has already put the answer within them. They just need someone to help them draw it out. And so, I mean, coaching really helped me as a leader and as a disciple maker. So, coaching is about asking questions. Where am I? In other words, this is my situation. I've got 3 churches that want me to come be their pastor. Okay. Have you prayed about it? You're asking questions, not trying to well, tell me about these churches. No. You're trying to help them to solve that problem with your own, you know. And so
would you as a coach there interject anything if you knew something about a church?
The only thing that I would try to do, and the reason that I say this is because the very first church that I went to pastor, 2 men who were mentors in my life, I overheard them in a conversation after they called me to be the pastor. They both came and listened to me preach in view of a call. And the one looked at the other and said, "What do you think?" And he said, "I don't like it." And the other one said, "Me either. They're going to eat him alive." That's what they said. But God called me to that church. God called me to that church. Sometimes God takes you into a problem because you're the solution. So you can't say, well, I want to go to the church that best fits my style, my standard of living, or my no.
No, I just.
You see what I'm saying?
No,
so
no, I'm just saying, would you forewarn a student, you know, your mentoree or your person, you know, that might be a problem, or what would you say?
It can be hard to coach somebody. It's something you know about.
That's what I'm saying.
You tend to mentor.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
You
You don't tend to coach.
You become more of a, you lose that coach.
When I was going through coaching, the guy was in Washington State, and our state paid for us to get certified coach. And this was long ago, so I hadn't. But you know, the guy he wasn't a minister. You know, he was a good Christian man, but he wasn't a minister. He didn't have a clue what it was like to do it. And that was the point. You know, right. He wasn't mentoring, but he knew the questions to ask to cause you to think and process properly. And sometimes that meant you had to go do more research, but he wasn't doing that. You filled out your own research that you had to go do.
Right. So you have had certified coaching training?
I have, but it's been a long time.
Well, no, that's great.
But what you're saying brings back memories. That's why it's.
No, that's great. So if you have input, help us out here, because people who've had the coaching, the goal here is that everyone here becomes the best coach they can be. So if you have anything
this
to
was
share.
Good for church planning, because, you know, even though I was a pastor, so that was a little different, but I wasn't in their context. So you could coach them, these church planners, because I didn't know what God called them in their context. I could just ask the questions and feel free to ask questions and let them listen to God for the answers.
Yes, sir.
That guy that we had in our first session was he's a pastor with a new church plant, and he's coaching CEOs and some big shots in business world that have nothing to do with him, but he's their coach.
Yeah, we've had several incredible, the guy that taught the actual mentoring was a certified John Maxwell mentor, wrote a book on mentoring, mentored some professional football players. It was incredible. I felt kind of dwarfed, but this guy he was great, but I learned, from him. The first question, the three questions, the first one is, where am I? In other words, say with James, he's a young man about to graduate from the university, about to go into seminary. Should I focus on being a pastor, knowing I'm going to go into the mission field? These are questions that he has. So where am I at right now? Where do I want to go? Well, he wanted to go to the mission field. So my thing was, what do you think the next steps are? Well, maybe language school. My wife is going to go to language school. Maybe I ought to go to language school. So so I'm drawing these answers out of him. And then how do I get there? These are the steps and the goals to accomplish the task. So like James was an apprentice with us. He wanted to be a pastor, maybe a missionary pastor. That's where it shows us where he was at, where he wanted to be. What were the steps to get there? He came on board with us, was an apprentice, went on to be an interim, went on to be the pastor. And hopefully after some of this COVID settles down, he'll be on the mission field. And so my job was to help him, to draw out of him the answers to some of those questions that he had along the way. And so you see there, the three questions: where am I? This is my situation. Where do I want to go? This is what I want to accomplish. How do I get there? Steps and goals to accomplish the task. And that's what you're trying to draw out of the person in coaching.
So in a cartoon once.
What's that?
It's called The Cruise.
Okay.
There was that one scene where he was standing there and he was stuck on one side and the family was on the other side, and he thought they were in trouble. So he was trying to think, how do I get over there? And he started thinking, what would this other guy do? What would he do? What would he do? And he finally got it and said, but wait, what would I do?
There you go.
So that's what I guess the end result is. This is what you want the people to be able to do. It's not what everybody else does, but how they would accomplish something.
Right. Right. And sometimes they know the answer. They just don't know they know the answer until you begin to probe. And that's what coaching, asking the right questions. And this is the coachee sometimes will get a little bit frustrated if you're a good coach, because they will expect you to give them the answer. And you just keep turning it around like Jesus and asking another question. And then pretty soon they draw it out themselves. And then they're like, why didn't I think of that to begin with? Because you didn't have somebody asking you the right questions, right? So
that's why it's important in a coaching relationship. You explain that right up front. I'm not here to give you the answers. I'm just here to listen to you and ask questions that'll help you process. And I may lead you to a mentor, but I'm not the mentor.
Right. And well, like I did do coaching and mentoring at the same time. There was areas of my, James wanted to be a pastor. So I could pour into him how to prepare a sermon. I mean, we're both going to be doing that. But there were questions he had about, should I go to, like he asked me one time, I want to further my education. I said, okay, what do you think your next step is? Well, I'm going to go to seminary. He went to Baylor. He said, I think I need to get my PhD. I said, what is God telling you about that? How long is that going to take? I'll give you an example here in a little bit about a situation where coaching came in that's real relevant. But let's finish the process here, and then I'll give you the example that I'm talking about. So the coaching process, the first part is to relate, establish the coaching relationship and agenda, reflect, discover and explore key issues, then refocus, determine priorities and action steps, resource, provide support and encouragement, and then review. You evaluate, celebrate, and revise the plan. So that's kind of an overview of what the coaching process is going to look like. And the next session after our break, we're going to talk about accountability to coaches and mentors, more of what actually putting the relationship together and getting it started looks like. So the first part of this 101 is more of an overview. So I want to give you a very personal coaching. This is the area that the light bulb went off in my ministry about coaching. So I had just had coaching recently. James was my apprentice. He came into my office and we began to knock heads on something. He almost left our church because me and him knocked heads all the time in the beginning. My wife would get so mad at me. James would come over to our house for supper. We fed the boy all the time. So he loved my wife's cooking. As a matter of fact, sometimes he would come to my house and just go in my kitchen and cook with my girls. I mean, he was like their big brother. So we had a good relationship on one hand, but when it came to ministry and stuff like that, we knocked heads all the time. And when he would leave, my wife would say, that didn't go well. And I would say, I thought it went pretty good. I told him, so.
I heard him stomp down the hallway and slam the door on his way out of the office.
So, and it wasn't because I was intentionally trying to knock heads with this young man, especially because I loved him. He's a great guy. He's very smart, had a lot of potential. And one day when he was in my office, he made a statement and he said, I can't stand it when we have these kinds of discussions because all I can do is look at your face and see my dad. And he turned around and walked out. And the light bulb went on. I was old enough to be his dad. He was freshly away from home. Like his dad always made him and his brother be clean shaven. As soon as he left home to go to college, he grew this scraggly little beard that's not really a beard out just so he could have his way, right? But I came to realize that the issue here is that when we would have an issue that we disagreed on, the way I was approaching him was more of an authority. I want to tell you what's right. You need to listen to me. I'm your daddy. That's all as soon as I went to do anything, a wall went up. Dad, I'm not listening to you. Then I have Trey Turner come down here for Church Planning Center and teach coaching, right? So he comes into my office one day and he sits down, and I don't really remember what the situation was, but it was a situation that I strongly disagreed with the way he handled, right? And I almost clicked. And I was like, wait a minute. So I started asking him questions. So James, tell me what made you come to that conclusion. Well, what do you mean? I mean, why did you respond that way? It was all questions. And he was like, well, because blah, blah, blah. I thought this would be the best way to handle it. Okay, good. So do you think it was the best way to handle it? Well, I don't know. What else was I to do? Now, I could have gave him the answer to that question. I don't know, but as you sit here and think about it and process it, do you think that was the best way you could have responded? Well, I don't know. Well, why not? Have you thought about, And he's like, well, I guess I could have done this. Oh, well, do you think that would have been a better way to handle that problem? I don't know. Why not? I don't know. Well, now that we're talking about it, do you think that would have been a better way to? And he's like, I don't know why I did that. I don't know either. What do you think you need to do now? Well, I don't know, but that was so stupid. Why did I do that? And I'm like, I don't know, but what are you going to do about it? So the whole process here was asking questions. And before it was over, he was like, man, that was dumb. I'm going to go correct, and so he goes and fixes the problem that my old way would have been like, James, that was dumb. See, that would have been a wall right there. Okay, Dad, I don't need, and he always wanted to call me boomer. The only problem is I'm not a boomer. His dad was a boomer, but that's the millennial response to everything. Stupid boomer, right? But the reality of it was poor leadership on my part, not his for being immature. Not his, as a leader, I should know better.
Yeah.
And so after that, our relationship completely changed. And the reason is because I quit approaching him like his daddy, because that's what threw the wall up all the time. And I learned that the better way to approach James was to just ask him questions. And I did this for a long time. And he even commented, you know, we get along so well now. Finally, one day I fessed up to him. James, I want you to take coaching. It helped me, you know, and he couldn't doubt it because our relationship was better. But I learned that instead of having that critical, correcting, authoritative figure in his life, if I would be more of a coach in a situation, he was smart. He was smart enough to figure out why. I mean, he asked, and you could ask my wife, the way he would get the look on his face. Why did I do that? You know, I don't know. Why did you do that? I don't know, but it was dumb. I need to go to correct it. So he did. So that's an example of what I'm talking about that was actually practical application in my own leadership and coaching and mentoring. And because of coaching, I think it saved his and my relationship. And I was able to go on and be, I hope, a pretty good coach and mentor to him. And I think he turned out to be a better preacher than me, and hopefully someday see him on the mission field. But I'm here to testify that coaching is what saved that relationship and helped me to help him further himself in his ministry. So
makes them own.
Yeah,
makes them own
yeah.
the problem, makes them own the stick, instead of you owning it by giving them.
And it also makes them come up with the steps and the goals to accomplish the solution as well. So another one that early in my ministry, I went to a John Maxwell leadership training. If you don't know anything about Maxwell, when he was just a young man, or actually a boy, his dad used to pay him. I'll give you this $20 if you'll read this book and give me a 500 word essay on what you read. Well, his dad would give him these serious leadership books, and he's like a 12-year-old boy, right? So he goes and reads it. And his dad didn't give him an allowance for taking out the trash, but would pay him to go read a book. Because of that, he become, at the time that I took that, he was one of the foremost, and probably still is today, leadership training gurus out there. But he said, he told us a story in that training that has to do with coaching. And it, at that time, helped me when I went to my first pastorate. So to make a long story short, he went as a young man, I think he was 27 years old. He was pastoring one of the largest churches in his area, like several thousand people at 27 years old. But one of his early churches was a smaller church. And when he went there, he noticed that everything that happened, especially like in a business meeting or anything, that the one deacon, the big tall one, would stand up and say, "This is what I think we need to do." And he had a deacon sidekick that would always say, "I second that." And that's what got done. So when he went to that church, he saw real quick who led the church. Well, the mistake a lot of pastors make is they go in and they think, now I'm in charge. Well, he's been here for 58 years and you're a whippersnapper, right? I was very young when I went to my first church. So he said that the door was about to fall off the church. The bottom piece of it was snagging people's legs, and he's afraid they were going to get cut, and it was just terrible looking. And so he drives out to this deacon's farmhouse, and he gets out there and he's talking to the deacon and he's getting a little tour and everything. And then he mentions, "So brother, what do you think about that front door?" Question. Right? What do you think about that front door? What's the matter with the front door? You haven't seen it? Well, yeah, I see it every time I'm going to the church. Oh, okay. Have you noticed the the bottom of it is rotten and that metal piece, the guard is sticking out. I'm afraid it's going to cut. Do you think it's going to cause someone to get cut? He said, the old deacon was like, well, if that thing's going to be a hazard, we just need to take that door off. Do you think so? You really think we ought to replace it? Well, we can't have something cutting. I mean, he's just playing, and he's not pouring in, he's pulling out answers. And he said, well, brother, do you think in the next business meeting you should say something about it? Well, in the next meeting, we're going to take care of this. We can't have a door falling off. It's going to hurt somebody, right? So he said in the next meeting, the deacon stands up and says, that front door is rotten at the bottom. It's about to fall off the hinges. It's going to end up hurting somebody. I recommend we put a brand new door on. His sidekick buddy said, I second that. Boom, new door. So what John Maxwell made this statement. He said, who was the leader in that? Well, John was the leader. Maxwell was the leader. He just didn't get credit. So he said, do you want credit or do you want to be a good leader? And see, a good leader has to get the answers out of someone that's necessary in order to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. And I think that's a great example of using questions and coaching. He coached the answer right out of him because he knew that if that guy opened his mouth, it was going to get done. Now, Maxwell could have stood up in the meeting and said, why have y'all let that door get all rotten and raggedy and fall? Might have been replacing the pastor, not the door, right? So it might not have gone to that extreme, but that right there was the first training that I took that showed me that you can be the leader or you can want credit and fight and jump through hurdles and not even get what you want accomplished. And that helped me when I went to my first church, because the first thing I did was wait in the business meeting to see who spoke up and who was really the leader of the church. And then you go to their house and get in good with them and ask a lot of questions and get a lot of answers. So, but I actually put that into practice at my first church. So to cap it up at the end here, a coaching mentoring agreement is basically a covenant agreed upon at the beginning of the relationship. We're going to talk about this a little more in depth in the next session, but set a beginning and an ending date. And you say a beginning and ending date. We're going to talk in the next section about why that's important. How often do we meet? What time will we meet? How long will each meeting last? We will develop and use an accountability form. We will define confidentiality. We will set goals at most meetings, maybe not all of them, but most of them, and we will set clear boundaries. So when you go into a coaching and mentoring relationship with someone, when I first was coaching James, he didn't know that, but I was coaching him later because I wanted him to learn coaching. I filled him in. After that, and I never will forget it, and I've had another guy do this too. He said, "You're coaching right now, aren't you?" Yes, I am. You know, but they knew that we were in that kind of relationship. And so it's very good to have someone in a relationship that you have set, that you have come to an agreement between both parties. What you don't want to have is for someone to think that you're manipulative or that you're in a type of relationship with them that you weren't honest about. So I don't know why someone would do that if you were really trying to build them up, but having a clear understanding of what the relationship is, I think is very crucial. And also the beginning and end date, and we'll talk about that a little more in depth. Let's take a break, and then we'll do the second half when we come back. All right, on the second part of this, we're going to talk about how to maintain and be accountable to coaches and mentoring. So the first part was kind of an overview of what coaching and mentoring is. The second part will be how we actually establish the relationship, set it up, and do it. So hopefully I can get a little better at doing these presentations. And if I did not send it to our brothers in Uganda, but if they want it, I will. If it'll work here. Don't you love technology?
Only when it works.
It's coming on the light slow.
Warm up a little bit. More against the dozen I should.
That is not the screen. All right, so we're going to talk about establishing clear expectations. If you're going to set up a coaching mentoring relationship with someone, as I talked about, both parties need to understand kind of what this thing is going to look like. It's not a hit and miss. So both participants in it need to understand what the expectations are. So what do clear expectations accomplish? First thing they accomplish is it develops trust. When you set expectations with someone and they see that you're sticking to the process, that you're doing what you agreed to do, it helps to develop trust. Just like with the young man that I coached and mentored in the beginning, it wasn't there because all I was his daddy trying to tell him what to do. So as we begin an actual coaching and mentoring relationship, he commented to me more than once how our relationship grew, that it developed into more of what a father-son relationship should look like, right? But it helps to develop trust. It helps to build a healthy coaching and mentoring relationship. Remember, you're doing this to help build someone up. You're doing it to help helping them to accomplish their goals. And so clear expectations from the very beginning, if you tell them this relationship is to help you develop, help you to be all that you can be, and then all they feel is like nothing in the process, then you're not meeting the expectations. You're not developing a healthy coaching, mentoring relationship. And then this bottom one is very important. It removes assumptions. When two people come together in any type of project, any type of job, it doesn't matter whether it's in the secular world, in the church, if there's not clear expectations, then people will assume. You ask somebody, well, why did you do that? Well, why would I not do it? You didn't tell me I couldn't. You know, you see what I'm saying? We had a young man that was a youth pastor, and they told him that the area that he was allowed to have activities and all of that. So he let all the youth groups sign the wall. Some of it was with Sharpies, some of it was with dry erase markers. And they did the whole wall. Well, they fired him. And the question I had was, did you tell him he couldn't do that? And they said, any idiot ought to know you don't do it. Well, if you don't tell them, there was no clear expectations of, when I went to my youth pastor position, the pastor's wife told me straight up, a church is warm and cordial, and we're not painting any murals. We're not, the walls will be white. I was told straight up, so I knew what the expectation was. And I think I shared with y'all how I overcame it. I got butcher paper. I just covered the whole wall with butcher paper and then painted murals. So it didn't hurt the wall, right? So there's ways to overcome it if you're like I was. So yeah. Right. So give some examples of early expectations. Early expectations in a coaching mentoring relationship. The first thing is setting a time and being on time. This doesn't sound like maybe it's all that important, but it's very important. If you're somebody like me, there are many days where like this morning, my first thing was a Zoom meeting at 6 o'clock this morning. Then after that, I came in here and began to work on things for class. Then I had a prayer meeting. Then I had a lunch meeting. When those things are lined out, you don't want someone late because you've got things to do. And so setting time, being on time. The other thing is appointment scheduling. Not only do you want to be on time, you want to set up. Well, you heard me click it.
I did. It just didn't go anywhere. That's why I was getting your attention.
Appointment scheduling. It's good. Like Tom and I had a little bit of a confusion on these Zoom meetings. We're meeting with our Uganda brothers on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of the month. And so my Zoom meeting said 4th Tuesday. Well, this is the 2nd Tuesday and the meeting was today, right? So but I have the full list of from now for months of each meeting that we're going to be having. So they're scheduled. We know what time they're going to be because of what do you call it? Daylight savings time is the reason we had to bump hours to 6 o'clock. We were meeting at 7. Our missionary brother over there, Ed, those guys didn't understand. Well, why are we meeting at a different time? Well, they're not, we are, because they fall back in time. So he understood. So he was trying to explain to them why we're ignorant. And what is daylight savings time? It's dumb. So, right, we need to get rid of it. But it would have not caused confusion with us. Addressing specific issues. Early expectation. As you begin to set up these meetings, you can talk about specific things you want to accomplish in the process. That way you're not getting off on other tangents or whatever. And then a beginning and an ending from the very start. This is very important. So many times people don't realize you start out in a relationship with someone, you're doing discipling, coaching, mentoring, and you many times you'll set a beginning date, but you leave no out. And so it tends to go on and on and on, and then it may fizzle or whatever. Coaching and mentoring relationships may not necessarily need to go for years on end. And so having that time to say, okay, we're going to meet for 90 days, and then after 90 days, we'll evaluate to see if we want to go further. So at least there, you're actually having an expectation. And then when that year gets there, you sit down and say, how do you think it's going? Should we continue with this? So there's very clear expectations. There's a starting date, there's an end date. Also, when it gets there, you don't have one person going, man, I want to end it, but I don't want to hurt their feelings. Well, if you have that built into the relationship from the very beginning, so then you get to the end of that 90 days, yeah, let's go. Get to the end of 6 months, yeah, let's go. Get to the end of the year, I think we're good. And both parties are okay because you're having at least an evaluation of an end. If you don't set one, it can tend to drag out forever. Regularly scheduled meetings. Why does the call me when you need to approach rarely effective?
Because they'll need you all the time.
Or they may never call you.
That's right.
People aren't sure when they need you.
Yeah. They never
Right?
call you.
I'm not sure if I do need you.
2 a.m., 3 a.m.
Yeah, or they may call when they feel they need
Yeah.
you, and you might not feel they need you at the time they do.
2 a.m.
So, and then also less meetings decrease effectiveness. So if you're not meeting enough, how do you know what's really going on? And how can you set goals if they're 3-4 months apart? They need to be regular. So whether your meetings are once a month, once a week, those are all predetermined because you're setting that schedule. And then too many meetings may cause burnout. And what may happen is you meet for 90 days and you say, we're going to evaluate, and you say, maybe this once a week thing isn't work. Let's do once a month. Because I tell you, I meet with multiple guys every week, and I don't mind because I feel that's part of what I do. I am a coach and a mentor to these church planners and stuff. So it's part of my job. but I meet every week with multiple guys. With some people, that's just too much. If my wife had to look at certain people that often, she would need counseling, not coaching and mentoring, because that's not her deal. But in my wife's defense, she does meet with a young lady every week for discipleship, coaching, and mentoring.
Yeah, I'm pushing an envelope on Tuesdays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see her all day and then here too.
Right. Exactly. So regularly scheduled meetings are very important, and we see the reasons why for that. So there's 3 keys to scheduling a meeting. When, what day and what time, where. A consistent place is probably better.
As few distractions as possible.
Right. I've got a guy in my church that is meeting with a young man, and they meet in a restaurant, and they have breakfast every week. That's not good for some people. Some people are too distracted. Some people don't have the money to eat every week. This is why these predetermined scheduling and how are we going to do this is so important. And then how long? And that means the length of the meetings, not just are we going to go for 90 days and reevaluate, but how long should our meetings be? And with 5 minutes. One of the guys that I meet with every week is about an hour. One of the other gentlemen that I meet with is anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours. So
be accountable for time too.
Right.
Don't carry them over.
The one guy I meet during the day on a work day. So he gets an hour slot, and I've got something literally that when we end, I'm going into the next thing. The other gentleman meets on a day that I have managed to, at least for now, make kind of free in the morning. He comes to my house. We meet at my house consistently. Matter of fact, I don't think we've ever met anywhere but my house. And we have coffee together, and we pray, we talk. It's pretty casual. So anyway, the important thing is that there's an agreement on when, where, and how long those meetings are going to be. And then the important part of the beginning and the end, we talked a little bit about that. What is the recommended length of time for a coaching mentoring relationship? Between 3 to 12 months. I said 3 months and evaluate, because you may not need to go 12. But 3 to 12 months. If you go longer than 12 months, unless it's something like me who's coaching these guys in planting or whatever, after that, you can tend to get either burned out or fizzle. You lose your focus. So when someone knows that I'm being coached to try to accomplish these goals in this area of my life, and I've got 90 days to do it, they're going to be serious. You know what I'm saying? And so setting those boundaries is important. Why is it important to have a predetermined beginning and end of coaching? I just said that. People often just assume they will know when they're done. That's not true. They won't assume. And it'll drag on and on and on. And like I said, it'll fizzle. You'll lose the focus of why you were meeting. Without an end date, people can feel that they're just rehashing the same old material. So that's the part I was talking about. It'll just start being redundant. And then the last thing, without an end date, people can feel there is no finish line or sense of completion. So most anything you do has a warranty, has an expiration date, has right. Well, even if you enter a contract, you put a movie thing on your computer or your television. I mean, it's got this amount a month for this long, and you got to
I'm a former teacher. We used to have it, by the end of this lesson, you will be able to.
Right.
You should be able to do, by the time we got done that day, what we talked about.
Right. That's exactly right. So
Also a danger of becoming a crutch.
a crutch,
And
right?
so let's put that in.
Yeah.
You're never going to be a crutch.
Right. Another reason for this also is because if you'll remember in the movie War Room, and I'm going to go back and maybe make sure I put a note about that as an illustration here, because it's such a great example. When the older lady had accomplished what she felt was her goal with getting this younger woman to have a prayer room, to be praying for her husband, to be praying for her family, they sat down and had a conversation. And she said, it's time for you to go on and become another young lady's prayer warrior is what prayer coach. But that's a great example of now it's time for you to go. And they may still touch base. So how's the young lady you've been mentoring, or how are things going in that relationship? You know, I think that when you enter a coaching and a mentoring relationship and you're still in proximity of each other, you're always going to have some form of touching base. But the goal of coaching is, this is where I'm at. This is where I need to be. Can you help me get there? There's an actual objective to your meetings. So discipleship can be an ongoing long-term relationship, but usually when you're coaching someone, it's in something that they specifically need to get to the next step in their journey, and you're going to help them get there. So a lot of times a coaching relationship, I coached a church planter in Wisconsin for about 18 months to 2 years. And then we were done. But that was a long distance. I wasn't there with him. And so we knew what to expect. We did it by Zoom. We had a DOM as a third party for accountability to make sure that we were sticking to the program. So, but it was still a coaching relationship, and it wasn't even in our area. And so every now and then after it was over, I would send him an email and just say, how are things going? And he'd kind of give me a little update, but it was no longer, his goal was he couldn't seem to get his church up off the ground. I even made a trip there and did a weekend for them on evangelism, helping them to do a block party. And I taught the eyewitness the conversations. So it was a great relationship. And then when I came back from that's when I did the coaching for a couple of years. So next, we're going to talk about accountability. What's the best way to ensure accountability in a coaching mentoring relationship? Using an accountability form. So this is an area that's probably neglected, is actually putting something together. You know, what are our meetings going to look like? And a lot of what it ought to look like is some listening and good questioning, right? But an accountability form will also say, we're going to do this for 90 days, then we're going to reevaluate. It puts the whole thing and it clarifies. Excuse me. So using an accountability form, what are some benefits to the accountability form? Bring structure to the meetings. The accountability form is going to have the time, the location, when, where, how long the meetings are going to be. It's when I first started having a relationship with Tom as a mentor, and he would coach me and mentor me in certain areas. And there were several times that I entered into an agreement with someone by word only. And he's like, Carl, my advice to you, this is mentoring, this is pouring in, is you need to get something on paper. So one time, Catherine and I rented a house from a friend. And the agreement when we were living there is that I would do some repairs to it and they would let us stay there for a certain amount of time for free. Well, Tom said, I'd get that in writing. Why? Accountability. Well, after we were there for a little while, the lady wanted back rent, like $3,000 or something like that. Later, she came to me and said, you owe me this amount of money. We were like, that wasn't the agreement, but I never put it on paper. And I should have listened to my mentor. Accountability is very, very important. And so this form is where you're going to put all the things we've talked about: when, where, time, how long, when we're going to reevaluate. The second thing, it keeps the coach and mentor, coachee, I didn't even know that was a word, and mentee on the same page. Like I was talking about, my wife and I were having that conversation the other day, and we were talking about the same thing, but we both had a different understanding of what the terms we were talking about meant. So this will keep us on the same page. And then it will show a record of progress for celebrating or correcting. So during your structure of your meetings, if you have set some goals, they need to be put on the paper. We're going to write down these goals. The next week, we're going to review. So you were supposed to go talk to so-and-so about an apartment. How did that go? See, there's the question. How did that go? So the part of the accountability is making sure that stuff gets on paper, and maybe having a little form to help you structure. We're going to open in prayer, maybe even look at some verses, or however you're going to structure it.
That could help you get started on your next meeting too.
It does.
If he's, during the course of one of the sessions, he comes up with some steps he needs to take
right
before the next meeting, then you can start off with, okay, how those steps work out.
Exactly.
And
then if he said, well, I didn't get around to doing this, well, why not?
Yeah.
Well, because of this. Well, what are you going to do now? You know, you're back to square one. What are you going to do now? So it's questioning, and you're not telling them what to do. You're making them come up with a solution for themselves, and then putting on paper what we're going to do next.
It's part of the hard part of it. You don't really control the outcome. I mean, you're asking the questions, they're coming up with the solutions, but if they don't bother to do it,
right,
your role is not to make them do it. You know, it's
well,
to encourage and point
right.
out, and hey, you said this last time, why, you know, where are we in this? But you sometimes you have to step back and be okay with failure for a period of time, and hope that God will bring them back into
right. And sometimes the question may be, do you think that's a realistic goal? So they have to think right there, is that a realistic goal? It may also be that you have to say, wow, you've got a lot to do this week. Is there anything you need me to do? I think there's times when that question needs to be asked if you think that you can actually be a part of the solution. You didn't come up with what the goal was. All you're saying is there anything that I can do to help you in that process? I think sometimes that may be necessary. But you're right. And I said most meetings you're going to set goals. You may not have goals at every meeting, but if they're here and they're trying to get there, and you're trying to help them come up with solutions to get there, there's probably going to be some steps and goals to take. And so having that written down and then reviewing it in the next meeting and then going on from there. And some encouragement. If they said, I went and did this and this is what happened and it turned out good, you know, some encouragement, some praise. That's great. That's great. And it may need to be, if it was something real big, to say, hey, when we leave here, let's go grab a burger or something. You know, I don't know, but just your goal is to build them up. The accountability part, if several weeks they haven't accomplished any goals, the question may need to be, now we agreed for accountability, right? See, it's still coming out of them in the form, right? So what are we going to do if you keep not fulfilling your end of it? How is this going to work? You're asking those accountability questions.
And the question maybe, do you think we need to continue?
Exactly.
You know, and it may have to go away. I've got a guy right now. We have discussed, he's going through, he believes he's called to be a Christian counselor. We've gone through him beginning that process, and then he thought he found a better way. And we discussed it and asked questions about it. He was convinced there's a better way. Well, now he's coming back and that was not the right, you know, path. And so now we can pick back up.
And so as he comes back and sits down, you can say, so let's talk about what we learned from this. What did you learn from this experience? And then maybe redirect. So that could be something that could actually in the long run come out as a positive, yet it was a negative situation. Cost him some
money, but yeah, in the long run, hopefully he's matured and grown from it.
Exactly. Well, the next part, confidentiality, and when we get into the counseling, we will talk about this in greater detail, but since coaching and mentoring requires that people be vulnerable enough to share their challenges and their shortcomings, coaches often find themselves in positions of trust, or at least they think they can trust you, and they should be able to think they can trust you. So I just want to give you a couple of tips for confidentiality, and I'm not trying to cut this short, but we're going to have a couple of sessions later that are going to really get into the depths of counseling, but confidentiality, which will apply to this as well. And the person that teaches it, one of them is Miss Rhonda, and she does a way better job than me. So instead of the redundancy, I'm going to let her do that. But just a couple of tips. Do not assume that the one being coached or mentored shares with their spouse. Yeah. So they're both at dinner with you, and you say, so what did you think about Sylvester jumping into this endeavor? And you go, what endeavor? Hamburger goes in the mouth. And so and you say, well, wait a minute, you're not supposed to keep anything from your spouse, right? I want to give you a little tip here. As a pastor, especially, people are going to share stuff with you that are in your congregation that if you share everything with your spouse, she's not going to be able to walk down the hallway of the church without, like, I can't stand that person.
Go in that church.
And it's hard enough as it is for the spouse of a pastor without having to know all of those details. And I'm not talking about you're keeping something from your spouse that's not healthy, but I'm talking about you get dumped on a lot when you're a coach, when you're a mentor, when you're counseling. And my wife has probably heard more than she needed to. And most pastors' wives probably do. And church is hard enough when you're in that level of leadership to have to deal with everybody's nonsense. So just don't assume that everything that you're talking about, that because you may get to the end of that coaching relationship and that person say, you know, I'm not so sure God's called me to do that. Well, what you're probably thinking is, well, if you'd asked the wife to begin with, she'd have told you that you weren't called to do that. Yeah. But it would save a lot of headaches, right? Not blowing something out of proportion that didn't need to be. I had a guy teaching the class one time. He said, it is so weird because sometimes my wife, God sounds just like my wife.
How smart we are.
Amen. Amen. I mean, trust me, there are times when my wife and I have had discussions, and later I'm like, yeah, okay, God. God speaks to us according to Henry Blackaby in many ways. Henry didn't include the wife in his study, but and it may be best not to share with anyone the identity of the ones you're coaching and mentoring.
Right.
And so some people don't care. But yeah. Now, the other day I was coaching so-and-so, and it's all over social media. The reason that that's put in here is because nowadays people share so much in their social media platforms, they don't even really think about it. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you have to say, hey, think about it. If you're coaching, mentoring, counseling someone, they may not want the whole world to know.
I've heard people say, you know, they'll hear a pastor and his wife coming to counseling, they'll hear about that. And it's like, they're having counseling, are they having problems? You know, it becomes
right.
That kind of, you gotta keep.
Well, and like I said, when Miss Rhonda comes, she's going to go in much more detail with the confidentiality, with the counseling part. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time there because it's going to carry over. So setting goals.
With your example with James, none of us know James.
Right.
Just Catherine, you know.
Well, and not only that, that's been
It's been
7, 8, 9
Yeah.
years ago. You're not a church member in the church where he's at,
Right.
thinking he's in my office because he's in trouble or something.
Right.
You know. And some people like me, I shared with y'all, I've got at least 2 right now that I meet with on a fairly regular basis. And I mean, I need them. So I don't care. And they speak into my life. Sometimes it's very encouraging. I had one of them get all on me about 10 days ago. And after I went and sulked and got over it, they were right. They were right. But I gave them permission to do that years and years ago, about 15 years ago. You have permission to speak it because I know they love me. I know they're doing it because they want to see me be the best that I can be. But that doesn't mean Carl's always right. So, yeah, my wife told Will, write that down. December 7th.
With the date.
Yeah. Setting goals.
December 7th.
It's not only the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, but it's the day Carl dropped the bomb in class.
It is on recording too. So
Yeah, it's recorded too. So,
Just make sure he signs the page.
so what are the 3 things you would like to accomplish in the next 30 to 90 days? This is a good coaching question for setting goals. So, and it could pertain to, you've already set a big goal. What are the steps that you intend on taking in the next? Remember when Brother Tim Randolph was talking about the task that you can accomplish within a short period of time? That's a task. And then there's projects. So you may be helping someone to accomplish this project. So they're already know where they're at and where they want to be accomplishing the project, but there may be months worth of steps that need to be accomplished to get there. So that's a good question. What are the 3 things you would like to accomplish in the next 30 to 90 days? And then some of the goals would be, okay, on this first one, what's your first step to accomplishing that goal? And you're drawing those things out of them. We've talked about this before. A general goal is very broad and lacks the detail to accomplish it. Brother Tim talked about that. We need SMART goals. It needs to be something that's attainable and measurable. And you can go back to your notes with getting things done with Brother Randolph.
And you can tell when it's done.
And then, yeah, and it has a,
stand back and say, we did that.
yeah, it has an end date that you've accomplished it. A specific measurable goal is just that. It's very specific and includes details for accomplishing it. I didn't go into a lot of details on that because I think Brother Tim did a great job. If you'll go back to your notes in getting things done, what SMART goals are, maybe you need to review that as you're going to coach someone in your accountability sheet. Say, now when we set goals, they're not going to be broad general goals, they're going to be SMART goals. The person that you're coaching may not know what a SMART goal is. So you can share that with them, and then as they're processing them. But vague general things they're just not measurable. You don't know if you've accomplished it. So, and then setting boundaries. This may be one of those things where from the very beginning in your, you're not going to call me at 3 o'clock in the morning, right?
I have to admit, I never realized I had to set that boundary until my latest one. I really did not expect that to have to set that as a boundary.
A relationship that is not defined is not safe. We need to know the rules and expectations by which the relationship is operating so we can relax and focus on our goals. So what are some examples of boundaries? Can the coach be contacted outside of regular appointments? I think that's very important. That's what we just said, What if it's 2 o'clock in the morning? Can I call you? No. So you're setting those boundaries really quick. Well, that person would say, if it is not an emergency, do not call me. I mean, but you're still setting the boundaries. The other thing is, can I send you emails? Why would that be not okay?
Because you're not going to draw anything out with emails from back and forth. They're probably going to be asking you questions.
Email's not really private, so we can get a hold of you.
I think that one of the #1 reasons that you need to determine that is because it may get to the point where they're just trying to send emails to get answers, to send emails to get answers. And that's what you're supposed to do in person. That's why you're having the relationship. In the day and age that we live in, it's so easy to shoot a text or an email to someone. And if it's not necessary, I would not recommend it unless it was, hey, I'm at the bank, you know, or whatever, but something came up. But those are just things that needs to be determined. And is our relationship purely professional, or are we friends? That, I mean, I think that's an important thing as well. And I think it would be hard to disciple someone, which you're going to use mentoring and coaching without it being personal and a friend. The guy that I did in coached in Wisconsin, I would say he's a friend, an acquaintance, but it's not a real personal relationship because he lives halfway across the country. So that relationship was probably a little more professional. It was planter to planter, pastor to pastor. So if it's someone in your church, I don't think they would like to be treated as a client, but more as my pastor should be my friend. That's how I feel they would look at it.
It's a family.
Yeah. It depends on the situation for me. I mean, you can be a friend and you can also be a coach, mentor all at the same time. You gotta have that's where the boundaries come in.
Well, I think that what we mean by that is like you and I pray, fast, we do things together every week. And I mean, we haven't sat down in a covenanted coaching relationship, but some of that's going to happen in general. But we're not in a professional relationship, even though I'm a pastor. We're friends. Yeah. And so some church members would kind of be offended if they felt that you treated them more like they were just a number, like just a client.
Well, so even as a pastor, you have boundaries for people because you can't have people all the time coming over your house, knocking on the door.
Oh, right.
You know, or calling you up, hey, you know. I mean, if emergencies, those are always that's the important one that nobody's going to say no to. I mean,
well, Cody will tell you that a lot of times, and this is probably not a real positive thing, but church members will say many times that, you know, the pastor needs to tend to his own family. He needs to take time for himself until they need you. Yeah. And then it doesn't matter if it's 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning or Saturday or, you know, whatever. So you just, sometimes it's hard to set those boundaries, but that's why in a relationship like this, you're creating you've got an accountability form. You're both going to agree to kind of some terms of how it's going to go. So in that, accountability is determined a lot of times by these boundaries. And so those are just some examples of setting boundaries. Can you think of any more? We could go all day with what it's going to be based on the individuals who are coming together, you know. So
I remember the first time I got into
what's that?
And what you're coaching for.
Right.
When I first got into AA, I had to get a sponsor, which is the equivalent to metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me one time, so you can call me anytime you want. Just make sure you go to the throne before you get to the phone. He said, I'm not a bank, I'm not a hotel.
Okay. You see, he said that's a great example of setting some boundaries. And he probably did that at the very beginning of that. And see, that should have been put in on paper as an agreement. You can get real formal with it. You're going to sign it. But we tend to be less formal. We tend to have too many loose ends like that. Seriously, I never would have thought that couple that were our friends would have came back later and said, you owe me this amount of money for all the time you lived in my house for free. Say that again. If I lived there for free, then why do I owe you all this money? You know. And when we lived there, I fixed a lot of things in the house. The hot water heater. They had a. Well, never mind. That doesn't matter. I'm still haunted by that, guys. I'm counseling back. But the thing is that if I would have listened to my mentor, I would have put something on paper. That's the point that I was trying to make is you need something, an agreement that has some clarity, when, where, how long are the meetings going to be? What are the boundaries? So, and then the last part, we will, the coaching and mentoring agreement, set a beginning and ending date from the start. I'm just recapping. And that should be on yours. So, and then how often do we meet? What time will we meet? How long will meetings last? Will we develop and use we will develop and use an accountability form? We will define confidentiality, and we will set goals at most meetings.
Every Wednesday and
One more.
twice on Saturday or Sunday.
Right. And we will set clear boundaries. So I just put that quick recap at the end of it. And part of the reason that I did that is because if you get into a coaching relationship, you can just look at the bottom section of this practical to.
So have you made one of those agreements? You have like an example that you can send me?
I don't have one like right now, but I bet I could. Yeah, that would be a good idea. That's a great idea to next year's class. I'll pass one out but I'll see if I can get you one that's a basic one. The reality is, if you were to take this right here, this little section, and put a line right there, set a beginning and an end, have a line right there, and then when you meet with them, just say we're going to set a beginning. But I'll draw one up. That's not hard.
Well, I didn't know if you have one already.
Right, I don't. But
you're always talking about it, so I think
right.
With the training, I actually had one. It was written out. We followed it because it was to demonstrate how. I've never done it since. So that's a great idea.
Right. But I'll definitely do that, because especially if it's already made, all you got to do is pull one out of your file and say, let's put this together. So I'll do that. That is a great idea. And I will get our brothers in Uganda one as well. The reality of it is that most people don't go to the extreme of the other way, where it's a rigid, formal form. Most of them tend to leave too many loose ends, and then either you haven't set a beginning and an end date, you haven't set an evaluation date, so it tends to draw out, fizzle out, or whatever. And then if you're not in your accountability form, you're talking about, we will set goals in most meetings. It's in your form. Well, if you're not setting goals, how do you know you're accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish? So some of it you've got to do, or you'll never know if you've accomplished it. And if it's something like what I did with the gentleman in Wisconsin, ours has to do with helping his church to get off the ground. And I shared with him, an evangelism thing. And in our next meeting, have you taught it, or have you set the date? He may not have taught it yet, because we're meeting I think we're meeting once every 2 weeks. But And that's another thing. If you're setting a goal like that, it may have to be implemented 2-3 months down the road. But did you get it in your calendar? Did you put it on the calendar? So those questions are still there for accountability. What other questions? Comments?
So you're saying that the coaching mentoring agreement, how would you change the wording of the questions up there to go with mentoring? Because mentoring, we're talking about discipling people.
Well, but even in a mentoring relationship, like what I did with James was more of a coaching, mentoring, discipleship. What I did with the guy in Wisconsin was straight up coaching. Well, I can't say that either because I'm a planter, and I'm not going to say that I didn't pour some into him. And that's something that I think really needs to be determined, because if you're really trying to coach someone in an area that they need help to get from point A to point B, you have to be disciplined to stick to, I'm going to coach you. Right. I'm not going to give you the answers. Right. But even in a mentoring relationship, you still need to know, when are we going to meet, where are we going to meet, how long are our meetings going to be, and what are we going to accomplish. My mentor about a month ago, and Catherine goes to the house with the mentor. We have a meal every week. That's part of our agreement. I mean, it's pizza every week. He's 89 and she's her age, and she's close to that. But they eat at home all the time. And so we want to change it up, and they're like, oh no, pizza's good. So we get one supreme pizza and share it between the 4 of us. And then we go either sit outside or we sit in the living room. She bakes some kind of muffin every week. We have our muffin and coffee. And then about a month ago, we started a question and answer time over being honest of Satan and his workings, and how many times he's mentioned in the scriptures, and why Christians don't take spiritual warfare seriously. So we were taking passages of scripture and reading it and then discussing it together. So we've got kind of a format. We have come to an agreement that yes, we're going to have some food together. We're going to enjoy a little bit of time of fellowship, but we're going to be in the Word every week. Sometimes, believe me, I heard, because he lives in Portuguese way too many times, he found this Portuguese version of because he lives. And we had to hear that for about 6 weeks straight. Come into his house, and the first thing he would do is he can't see real good, so he talks into his device, and it tells his television what to do. And he'll say, Siri, find YouTube. Finding YouTube. And then it'll come up and he'll say, play because he lives in Portuguese. Finding because he lives, and it'll come up, and then we'll say we know it now,
Oh my God.
So, but we joke about it. But the point I'm making is that we do have a set time. We study the Word. We pray together. We're here to build one another up in Christ. But we do enjoy some pizza and some coffee and a muffin. But ours is more of a long-term coaching, mentoring, discipling relationship. And that's what we wanted. All parties were in agreement. So even though we're suggesting here 30 to 90 days, we're talking more like leadership in a church, pouring into a young man or a young woman in the church. You need some boundaries. You need a time frame. This man made a comment one time. He said, I've been a pastor for 60 years. And I don't think he said this openly before men, but he said, I feel like I did a whole lot of things in my own strength instead of relying on God, and I can't change it. But if I could do one thing now in my old age, it's to pour into young ministers and help them to see that God does it better than we do, and that we'll never accomplish anything in our own strength. And when he said that, I was going, hey, I'm a young minister that needs to know that, right? And so in private, I went up to him and said, would you be willing to pour into me what you said? I'm that young minister and I make a whole lot of mistakes. And he said, sure. And we've been doing it every week for several years now. And I'm going to tell you something, the wisdom of an 89-year-old man who's been in 2 branches of the military, been a firefighter, been a chaplain in the military, been a pastor. He's got multiple degrees and he's way smarter than me. So it's a win-win for me. And then he said one day to Catherine and I, he said, it still baffles us why y'all want to come hang out with a bunch of old people. So they're getting something out of it too, you know. And so coaching and mentoring relationships, discipling relationships are great. But we, even though ours is a little more loose, we haven't agreed. We know, I mean, he said there's no use for us meeting if we're not going to glorify him, if we're not going to be in the word, if we're not going to be praying, which we wouldn't want a relationship that didn't do that anyway. So I want to encourage you to seek out someone to be a mentor to, and they might not know it. I don't know if WT knows a lot about coaching. I didn't up until just a few years ago. I didn't know what coaching is.
I don't think he knows a lot about it, but he knows a lot.
But he does it, right?
Yeah.
He does it.
He just knows book, but he does it because
He does it without realizing.
just sitting in the car back and forth.
So what Will say, Will picks him up every week for church.
Like his prayer. Jesus.
This has psychology degree.
Yeah, he has a psychology degree too.
He's just not, I mean, just a lot of insight.
Yeah, he said, I want to teach you a prayer. And he was in front of the whole church. I had him come up. God, this is extra, guys. I'm not going to charge y'all for it. He stood up in front of our church and he was giving our morning prayer every Sunday. And he said, I want to teach you a prayer that anytime you're hurting.
He was talking about his condition he had.
Yes, his heart issue.
Yeah.
Well, he said this more than once though, because we already know the prayer, trust me. Anytime something's going on in your life, or he was having an issue with his heart, and he said, this was my prayer, Jesus. And everybody in the whole church was like, he said it loud. He said, that's the prayer.
Well, see,
just call on him.
See, I turned out self-conscious because after he did that, he does it every time he gets in my car.
So I think we ought to end with that.
He's awesome.
With that.
That's all I can say.
Well, I hope tonight has been beneficial. I will get a sample form made up. I'll make sure our guys in Uganda get that, and even the PowerPoint if they would like. But let me close this in prayer and had a good, yes, sir.
I'm not sure right now. It looks like there's a shooting at the Clean Mall. They're still there right now. So we may need to.
Okay, I'll pray for that. I'll pray for that. Lord, we love you so much. And Lord, all around us these days, there's so much hate and chaos and destruction. And Lord, we don't know what's going on in the Clean Mall in any detail except that it's a shooting. So Lord, I just pray that no one has lost their life. Lord, I pray that the person doing the shooting, that our law enforcement would be safe, that they would be able to bring the situation under control. And Lord, that's what they're trained for, to put their lives in danger to help protect our lives. And so, Lord, I just pray your intervention in it, that you would keep our first responders safe. Lord, I pray that they would be able to apprehend this person without taking their life as well. And Lord, we just pray the best outcome in this situation could happen. So we lift it up to you in Jesus' name. Lord, we thank you for the fact that no matter what's going on around us, that you're still on the throne, you're still in control, and that no matter what happens in this life, that we can have a peace of knowing that our God is in control. Lord, I pray tonight that as everyone leaves here, keep them alert, take them home safely. We thank you for loving us. We thank you for this season. And Lord, you're just so good to us. And just I pray that our lives would be lifted back up to you as a living sacrifice, as an offering, that we would be pleasing in your sight. And Lord, I thank you for this training center. I thank you for our partnership with our Uganda brethren, and just the way you're working in and through them as well. And just go with us, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.